Marama Davidson.
E te tiamana, tēnā koe hurino I tēnei whare, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka tika ka tūahau o ngā rōpū kākariki ki te tautoko I tēnei pire. Kia mātou, he pire rangatira tēnei, nō reira e te minita tēnā koe hoki mo tēnei mahi whakahirahira. I am going to turn now to speak in English, which is my first learned language, and that is the whole point, actually, of my speech. Mr. Chair, we stand to support the Reo Māori Bill. We particularly strongly support Nanaia Mahuta's SOP, which calls for a Crown apology to all of us. The SOP also recognises the impact of the policies rather racist from the day and is an overarching apology from the Crown. The Greens would like to flesh out further some of the examples and the ways in which our people have been impacted upon. And this is important. One of the previous speakers, John O'Naylor, talked about some of the negative social media comments that he attracted when he put him speaking Māori up on his page. There is still some of that around, and I will go into further examples of what this apology can do, which is helping break down the wedge of misunderstanding that we are still hangovering from, which means that too many people do not understand and are quite fearful of what Te Reo Māori should mean for all of us in Aotearoa. So, and anything that fosters understanding will also create a healthier partnership for Te Tiriti for this country. I particularly wanted to honour those of our tupuna, those voices who paid the price for the very colonisation impacts that almost wiped away our language, Mr. Speaker. I want to turn again to the previous speaker, John O'Naylor. He has my full tautoko. I honour John O'Naylor, Member of Parliament for the National Party, in his genuine support to speak Te Reo, to support efforts to revive Te Reo, to support his Māori mokopuna, to be around Te Reo and to see it being valued and honoured within his whānau, because it is also their language and their taonga, and therefore it becomes the taonga of the whole family, whether they are Māori or not. I honour the member John O'Naylor, and it also reminds me sharply of the irony of the time. John O'Naylor spoke about hundreds of thousands of reach that he had on social media from speaking the very language that my grandmother was beaten for in her native school in her time. I honour you, John O'Naylor, and it reminds me why this apology is so important. That one beating of one young girl of her native tongue effectively wiped out Te Reo for the following 3 generations of her whānau, who are my children. To this day, it has taken us 3 generations to put Te Reo back into our whakapapa. That's my grandmother, her 7 children, her, I lost count of more grandchildren, and even more great-grandchildren. From one beating, effectively wiped Te Reo out of all of the rest of the tree down. And so this is where the apology is important for us, to acknowledge those people who paid the price, while continuing to acknowledge the support of non-Māori like John O'Naylor and their mahi to put right what went wrong. I recall the late Professor Nin Thomas of Auckland University, law lecturer. I recall my very first day in one of her classes as a young Māori law student. I recall Nin Thomas opening her lecture to all of her students with a greeting in Te Reo. I recall a young non-Māori behind me getting rather grumpy, angry and muttering, "This is not an effing Māori class." I recall her persistence regardless to continue with her inclusive welcome. Mr. Chair, please. Thank you. I recall her persistence to continue with her welcome regardless of those challenges, of those rather racist misunderstandings, of that fear that she faced, and I remember her. I think about my colleague, my co-leader, Me Te Reo today. I think about her journey and overcoming what we all as learners have to overcome to stand in this house and sometimes be ridiculed for it, to speak her own language. I think further about learners most of us here are actually, and we have been open about our journey and the challenges we face. Mr. Chair, I have said often that my grandmother was beaten by colonisation for speaking her language. In Māori, kua patua tōku kuia e te kawana. It is not lost on me that the very first time I tried to say that sentence, I got it wrong. And I said, my grandmother hit the Pākehā. It's really easy to get this stuff in Te Reo wrong. And the irony of trying to explain in my grandmother language that it was beaten out of her and getting the sentence wrong the first time I tried to say that in Māori, I thought was one of the best symbols of exactly what has happened to my family. So, Mr. Speaker, it has taken the sweat, the blood, the hard work, and mainly the aroha of our people that we have got any of it still here today. It has been because of people like Hannah Jackson, and I recall her leading the petition brought to this very house, a petition and a hikoi that I'm happy to say my own father was part of supporting. It became the job of people, young Māori like Ngā Tamatoa, who had lost their reo and were standing up with love and anger to get it back. It became the work of the long and arduous Te Reo Māori claim before the Waitangi Tribunal in 1987, which finally, fancy that, made our own language official. Made our own language official. I want to celebrate the strength of our nannies who started up the kohanga reo movements, huri no I te motu, in the back of the garages, breaching all sorts of safety standards, breaching all sorts of set-up standards, but doing it anyway from love for our reo and from love for their mokopuna. I want to celebrate the whānau today who are stumbling but still carrying on to learn our reo. And this is why an apology is important, Mr. Speaker. An apology, despite all of it, we survive. And an apology would be the absolute show of strength of a nation and of this house. An apology would be a show of really wanting to acknowledge what happened and that we can go forward. And it is long overdue, Mr. Speaker. So to finish, I endorse that New Zealand is the only place in the world where we can call this language ours, where we can save it, cherish it, love it, and speak it officially in a House of Parliament. While the Reo Māori Bill is not the be-all and end-all of our reo journey, it is important. It is important because the Crown needs to maintain a responsibility to put back what was taken away, not just from Māori, but from our whole nation. New Zealand would do well to offer a full apology, do well to honour the hard work that has happened to restore our reo, and I celebrate the strength and support Nanaia Mahuta's bill. Kia ora.